Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy.
The dust has settled on the season, and there's been some bombs dropped all across the NFL. Certainly Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick over the last 24 hours, all quiet in New Orleans. Does that surprise you?
No, I think there was a stage in the season where I thought it could potentially happen if things turned a certain way, and then they won 4 out of 5 to close the season. They were right there in the playoff mix. I think a lot of people would argue that that's not good enough considering what the preseason expectations were, what they committed to the roster, what their schedule was like. I get it, I understand all that, but the Saints are, as an organization, one that is very resistant to change. And it wasn't about to can its head coach after he just got done with a winning season and all that. So I think the finish was enough for me to where I just knew it wasn't going to happen.
Interesting phrasing from you there. Resist to change as opposed to like committed to continuity. Do you think it's a negative that this organization is resistant to change?
I don't think I can say it in terms of black and white like that. I think there are definitely some aspects of it that are negative. Yeah, they're set in their ways on things. They're not very dynamic as an organization because of that. They have had essentially the same decision makers in place for really like 7 straight years, and for the most part for the last 20 years. There are negatives that come with that, but I also think that this is a day and age, especially when you're talking about some of these new owners that come in, guys that are essentially like hedge fund guys, or tech people who come in and they try to implement the that world of business onto an NFL franchise, and often it just explodes spectacularly in their face. I think there is something to be said for stability in a professional sports organization. That there's a good part of that. It's just you can't let the bad parts outweigh the good parts, and you gotta be able to identify when that happens and weed those parts out and bring in new ideas.
So let's start talking about some decisions that'll be made, and we'll get that in a second. But I do want to go to Derek Carr first. Uneven play early, very banged up early. Pretty good late. What should Saints fans and the organization feel about their quarterback for the next year plus?
Well, I'm not going to get into what Saints fans should feel because, if you just base it off of Twitter, they're never ever going to feel good about him ever. I tweeted his stats for the last 4 games when he was awesome. He had 125 passer rating, 75% completion percentage, 12-to-1 touchdown ratio, and everybody's like, "Get this man out of here." I'm just like, okay, sorry for saying your $40 million quarterback did play well.
Yeah.
I think they're in a decent spot with him right now. I think they saw, you figure out the play calling. They added a lot more play action. You figure out the protection stuff. They gave up far fewer sacks. I think in the last 11 games of the season, they gave up fewer sacks than they did the first 6 games. You figure out the connection with the young wideouts that took some time to build. I think you saw what it could be. You saw he's capable of being a very good quarterback in the NFL, like a top 12 quarterback, which I think is good enough to get you where you want to go if you get the rest of your roster figured out. But they can't let the things that lingered for the first 10 weeks of the season. They can't let that stuff linger as long as it did this year. When stuff starts breaking down, they have to. We're talking about a team that's resistant to change. They have to change things faster. They can't go 10 weeks of the season where they're one of the worst teams in the red zone by far, and then be like, "Oh, here's our fix," and it's like a magical switch is flipped. They've got to. I think they got to be quicker in assessing how to help him out, because when it's there, it's good enough. But they've got to get him there.
If you had to bet your first nickel on which player is more likely to be on the roster for Week 1 next year? Would it be Ryan Ramczyk or would it be Marshon Lattimore?
It would. Oh God. Look, I mean, I'm gonna say probably Lattimore. I'd just say like Ramczyk is gonna be here if he's playing football.
Right.
Right. Like there's no doubt in my mind about that. But I think there's a significant doubt about whether he's playing football next year or ever again. This is a knee injury that has bothered him for years. Like it's not just something that cropped up this year. He was on a load management plan in August because of this. And just kind of progressively got worse to the point where he couldn't play on it anymore. And you hear athletes talk about this all the time. When you get to a point where you can't be your competitive self, like it's hard to keep playing. You start worrying about what your body's going to be like after you retire. So I wouldn't be surprised if he at some point in the next couple months decides to hang it up. I'm not anticipating Marshon Lattimore going anywhere next year. But the Saints did leave themselves like an exit if they want to explore that route. And I'm certain that if they decided to put Marshon Lattimore on the market, there would be interest. I just don't know if the compensation would meet what the Saints threshold is to get rid of a player of his caliber. Because he's still very good, but there's issues. I mean, he's played I think 17 games the last 2 seasons, and when he's on the field, he plays at a really high level. But when he's not, and you're paying $20 million to a guy who's played half the games the last 2 years.
And his backups have been pretty good, and that's, I think, something the Saints need to look into. Last year, we understand that there was a huge focus outside of quarterback at retooling the defensive front. The jury's still out on how good those resources that they dipped into it were spent. But what's job one this year?
I mean, I think it's offensive and defensive front again. I mean, they've got to fix those areas. Trevor Penning was just a massive letdown this year. You tell me you're going into Week 1. If you would have told me that Andres Pete would have been their stalwart left tackle, I would have been like, you are high. I think they probably got to invest a high draft pick, first or second rounder, in a tackle prospect. They got to think about the idea of moving Penning to guard. They might have to draft 2 tackles.
Yeah.
Ryan Ramczyk. It's huge. It's a huge area of concern. I think there's a good chance they have a new coach in there, coaching the offensive line, because it was just a massive disappointment this year, whether you're talking about pass protection or creating lanes for the rushing attack. That they got to get better there. And then they got to get better on the defensive line too. Yeah, I know they signed the 2 tackles last year. They used a first rounder on Brian Brzee. They signed Carl Granderson to an extension. They put resources into it, but it wasn't enough. Their pass rush took a significant step back, and it had already taken a step back the year before as well. So they got to figure out something there, and it's not just the pass rush. We're talking about both sides not really controlling the line of scrimmage this year. They were terrible against the run. They can't go into next season just hoping those guys are going to get better there.
Luke, get your life together. We'll talk soon, man. Thanks for the time.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.